are very pleased to welcome and honor the 1972 Team Canada on the anniversary of their historic Summit Series victory on this very day. In fact, many members of this iconic team and their family members will reunite today to mark the anniversary and will be honored in a pregame ceremony and throughout the game at tonight's preseason game against the Montreal Canadiens. We are joined here this afternoon by a number of members of the team to share their memories of the Summit Series victory and their thoughts on the 50th anniversary of the series that had such a profound impact on the game of hockey. Joining us today on the stage, of course, Mr. Ken Dryden, Mr. Paul Henderson, and Mr. Serge Savard. We'll open it up to media questions after they've briefly opened with a few remarks. Real quick housekeeping note, as soon as we're finished here on the stage, we'll pose for a quick photo op with the three principals here, and then get into some one-on-ones and media scrums after. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Dryden.
Thanks, Dave. And thanks, everybody, for being here, and thanks in particular to the Leafs for hosting this. This all began, I'm not sure, maybe a month or so ago, and it started with a phone call from Brendan Shanahan to Ron Ellis. And then Ron contacted me, and the rest sort of moved from there. And it all had to do with the great coincidence of there being an exhibition game this night, Leafs and Canadiens, and how could it be turned into something that was special, that felt like an appropriate commemoration of an eighth and final game 50 years ago. And of course, as it develops, then it gets bigger and bigger and nicer and nicer. And I know we're looking forward to tonight a lot, and I think you'll enjoy it as well. For all the work that has been done, Brendan and Allison Rockwell has been amazing in dealing with everybody, and others whose names I don't know, and they do know, and I'm sure will thank them on behalf of us. But it's a very special occasion for us to gather 50 years later, and so we are glad to have this opportunity and to be here. So, Serge and
thank you, Ken. Thank you, Mr. Shanahan. Ronnie Caron always told me you were a great guy. So thank you very much for what you're doing. It's really appreciated from all the team. And for us, the only reason I'm here, anybody of my teammates could be here, but they need a defenseman. They need a defenseman. They had a goaltender and the hero of the series that scored the 3 winning goals in the last 3 games. For all of us, it's probably the greatest moment of our career. It's nice to be on a Stanley Cup, but this thing is something really special. And like my friend Yvan said, it's really beautiful to have both of them. So we had a great team, and you know, everybody mentioned at that time, if you're old enough to remember, that we were not going to lose a game. We were going to win all the games by 4 or 5 goals. But if that happened, I don't think we would have been here tonight. It was very, very difficult series, and a lot of people don't remember our flag was only 6 years old at that time, and very controversial. And as soon as we put the flag in front of our jersey and won that series, you never hear a word about that. And I think Team Canada 72 did a lot to unite the country at that time. And I'm very proud of it. Thank you.
You know, when I look over my shoulder, it's still hard for me to believe that I scored those 3 goals. But everything fell into place for me. First of all, Bobby Hull couldn't play. He was a left winger. stroke him off the list. And then they put Ronnie and I with Bobby Clark. And we had a lot of good center icemen there, but he was the perfect center iceman for us because we got together and we really were hoping to get into the Toronto game here. And we might make it as the shutdown line because we were all, good defensive players, and we didn't know much about Clarkie at that point. But when I look over the highlight of my whole career, there's no question. And I like to say, I'm the only guy that played professional hockey for 18 years and scored 1 goal. That's basically what it is. But, even today, it's just a wonderful time. We had a great time in Ottawa, and like, Sandy, thanks for doing this, but, we've lost 10 guys. 10 guys that are not here today, and thank goodness we got some family members there, and it would have been nice to have the whole group here, and then obviously the storm down in Florida, some other guys couldn't come, but we've faced adversity in Russia, and there's a little adversity here today, but you know what? We're going to have a great day. God bless you for coming.
Thank you, gentlemen. With that, we'll open up to questions from the media. Simon?
Simon England from CBC, gentlemen. Paul and Ken, you both talked about the fans, the 3,000 Canadians that went over, and the thing I always remember is chanting "Da da Canada, yet yet Soviet." When you heard the fans in the crowd, what did that mean to you in the Luzhniki Arena? Paul, first, if you don't mind.
Well, I got to tell you, without them, we would not have won the games. And I'll tell you what, we heard that cheer, but I'll tell you what the difference was. We lost the first game, and we had to skate off the ice. And we had to go by the Canadians. They went crazy. And when you're down, we've lost, and then it was a miserable night in Moscow that night. And we got back to the hotel about an hour later, and there were several hundred Canadians outside our hotel. And we got off the bus, and they went crazy again. Now, the fact that most of them are hammered has got nothing to do with it. But I would suggest to you the Canadian national anthem, and I think Peter Mahovlich mentioned this when we were not, that the Canadian national anthem has never been sung with more fervor and vigor. And we're standing on the blue line, and honest to God, there was bumps on your arms. And so without them, and the neat thing, I was at a book signing here a couple of weeks ago. There was 10 of the people that came to Russia were at this, and I got my picture taken with them. And I was able to tell, I gave them a hug. I gave them a hug without them. And every guy here would totally agree with it, the significance.
It's trying to imagine 1972. And 50 years ago, not many Canadians traveled outside of North America, except maybe to the Caribbean. Very few to Europe, almost none to the Eastern Bloc countries, and almost none to the Soviet Union and to Moscow. And as I've said at other times, and this was before bucket list time, before people would be conscious of if you had the capacity, if you had the resources, you'd make a list of places you want to go, things you wanted to experience, to check them off and to tell stories about them. That's not why, those weren't the 3,000 Canadians that were there, and that's not why they were there. And that kind of feeling there that was conveyed, and as you prefaced in your question, I mean, the part that I love to think about in terms of the Canadian fans is how they came up with Da Da Canada and Yet Soviet. And before that time, at any international games, it was Go Canada Go. And it was probably the same guys in a bar after a game and messing around. And the only Russian they really knew were Da and Yet. And they had heard Canada, and so they put it together. And it would have been a few people that started chanting it, and then a few more, and then it became 3,000. And when you're that far away, 3,000 people traveling together, they sound like 30,000. And it mattered. I mean, that feeling that we couldn't quite get from Canada in it and that was going on, we were experiencing it through those fans and just being reminded of how important all this was to everybody.
I think Peter was at the bar when they started doing that. Peter. Well, we, like Kenny mentioned, that was really the first look that we had at the communist country. We heard about, they were the bad boys, we were the good boys. We got inside of that country, and all of a sudden, one game, you have Brezhnev that is sitting 5 rows behind Tretiak, and this thing, we got politics, but we didn't want it, but we got squeezed inside of this thing, and you had one country that want to show the world that they were the best. They had the best athlete. They want to show the whole world they had the best techniques. And on the other side, at one point in time, we say, whoa, we invented that game. You're not going to tell us what to do. But after that series, I think things start to change. Those guys train 11 months a year. We train 11 months a year now. We changed all the thing. And when we came back in Canada, I remember Scotty Bowman was our coach, and he started to look at changing things, doing things off ice that we never used to, and we hated it. And Scotty started to have us making push-ups on the ice, and we hated it. So we started to think to change things around, and I think one of the reasons the game is what it is today, a series like that made some changes. Well, the fans, we had great fans. They said 3,000 of them, and the Russian they didn't applaud, they didn't yell, they were whistling. If I remember, they were whistling, and the 3,000 that we, out of 10 or 11,000, were a lot louder than the rest. And like Peter was mentioning, when we came back at the hotel after that 5th games, we were down 2 games. And the crowd started to sing, "Oh, Canada." We felt everybody were behind us. And it was different because, we didn't communicate like we do now. You don't look at your phone and see what the weather is like in Montreal or Toronto. In those days, we only had telegram, and everybody was sending telegram, and the trainer put all those telegrams on the board in our room, and sometimes hundreds of names on the same telegram from a small town in Canada. And all of a sudden, they had to put some on the wall outside of the room or in the other room. Was not enough space. So it really was the first time that you had a team where the whole country was all behind the same team.
Thank you. Kevin, we have a microphone there available to you for your question. Kevin McGran of the Toronto Star.
Gentlemen, I just wonder, Serge, you just brought it up with the training. I wonder if you think, looking back, had you trained as seriously as the Russians over the summer, would the series have been different?
Well, in our time, the season was a lot shorter, and we were not making a lot of money. We couldn't train 11 months. We had to work in the summer to survive. Everybody had work in the summer, and Phil was telling us he was still working in the mine when he started playing with the Bruins. And even Red Berenson, he didn't make much money. He worked till he was 82. I don't know if I answered your question, but
Had you been able to train through July and August, do you think you would have been able to take the Russians on?
yeah, but it was really up to the individual. You know, like in our dressing room in the 70s, we didn't have a bike. We didn't have any weights. We didn't do anything but on ice activities for between an hour and 2 hours. But some were more dedicated than others, and some were training in the summer and running in the summer. But when I first arrived on the team, I was making 10,500, and I can tell you, I had to work in the summer. So we didn't train as much. And it happened that I work in a brewery and I was drinking during the day.
Well, I would say that it takes a while to become a team. And you gotta get three guys to get to know one another and things like that. So you gotta play games to do that. And so I think we could have been a lot better prepared, but you gotta get down with you know what your job is out there. And so it obviously would have helped us, but it took us a while to get there. We didn't like each other. We hated the suckers, especially these Montreal Canadiens. But anyway, you know, and that's just my guess. We could have done better, but it took us a while to become a team.
I'm not even really sure that that's the question, because it wasn't going to happen. I mean, that's not how, as Serge is saying, that's not how you did it at that time. And so if Harry Sinden had said to us, you know, and again, it wouldn't have occurred to Harry or to John Ferguson, but if they had said that, okay, these, you know, our opponents play 11 months a year. So you guys, when the Stanley Cup playoffs are over, we want you all to gather, and you're going to prepare during the summer, and you're going to do off-ice training, and you'll go on the ice a little bit just to prepare for this series. It wouldn't have happened. I mean, it's just not the way things were done then, and not only wasn't it the way things were done, but there was no need to do it because we were the best. And if we were the best, then the assumption was that we did it the best way. Just because they did it differently, if they weren't the best, big deal that they did it differently. So it just wasn't going to be, you know, that kind of hypothetical just wasn't any kind of reality in 1972.
We weren't really friends with the other guys. The Rangers, we hated the Rangers, we hated the Blackhawks, we hated the Bruins, we hated everybody else. And that's the reason, basically, it took us a little while to become a team. The fact that we got our butts handed to us in Montreal and Vancouver solidified one thing. Nobody likes losers. We got booed out of Montreal. We got booed out of Vancouver. We were trying our best, but we were not prepared. We were ill-prepared. And the reasons the Russians decided to play that series is they actually thought they were going to win that series. Problem was, we fooled them. We became a team. We showed them what Canada could be about. At that time, Canada was thinking about separation. I was living in Quebec at the time. There was lots of issues. And all of a sudden, even those issues were put aside, and we all become Canadians again. And that's why we look at this flag and see how important it is. It enveloped all of Canada.
Questions? Yep.
I don't know if you've had a chance to see the new toonie that features the Summit Series. Can you tell me what that means to you to have beyond the currency?
About the toonie. About the toonie. I remember when they came out with a stamp a number of years ago, and I mean they came out with one now, but of thinking that as a kid, maybe you might dream of playing in the NHL, maybe you might dream of winning a Stanley Cup, but you'd never dream of being on a stamp, and you'd sure as heck never dream of being on a toonie. So it's pretty nice. It's a pretty good deal.
Well, we hated them in '72, no question about it. But over the years, we did a tour with them. And we find out they're just terrific guys. They're trying to keep a wife happy. They're trying to raise kids, provide for the future. But I'll tell you one thing. Don't ever try to drink vodka with them because you'll be under the table before you know it. So, and there's a bunch of us have done different things with them, and Frank's had Tretiak in his home, and I've got to know him well because I've done a few shows. They're just terrific guys. They really, really are. We should have hated the system, not them.
Any questions on the side of the room? Marty?
Hi, I'm Marty Klinkenberg from the Globe and Mail. I wanted to ask you what you remember of that day in particular, not the game itself, but in the hours leading up to Game 8.
For me, it was one of these things that I think that after we had lost the first game in Moscow, and Harry came in and basically told us that he thought we played one of our best games of not only the 4 in Canada, but the 2 in Sweden. He basically felt that we weren't going to lose another game. And, you know, for me, I was just a killing penalties once in a while, so on and so forth. So I never got to play a regular shift until that second period. I started playing left wing with Yvonne and Phil Esposito, so I started to play a lot then. I really wasn't concerned about it. I never even thought about it. Didn't realize the impact it would have had we lost. All I know is the impact that it has had because we won.
I just remember being nervous, and more than I had ever been before. I had been nervous in a way where you feel your stomach and you feel your insides. I had never felt my legs like jelly. And that's what it felt like to me from just before the end of the 7th game, after it was pretty clear we were going to win and the 8th game was going to matter, and I knew I was playing in the 8th game. From that moment, then it was jelly. And before, you know, when I had been nervous, I knew that whatever I was feeling in my stomach, by the time a game would begin, it would be gone. What I wasn't sure about is that if it goes to your legs, what happens then? Will it too go away? And really, it was just trying to get through that time and to get to game time, and knowing that once that game was right there in front of us, then that's all that was in your head, in your mind, in your legs and belly, and then it just took over all of us. So, but before that time, it was nerves until it wasn't.
That's okay, you can go without the mic. You can go without.
Could you speak up a little louder?
I'm sorry. My question for Mr. Drucker. What, if anything, did you know about Tretiak coming into the series? And what did you think of it as
I didn't know a lot about it. I knew a little bit because I had played with the Canadian national team, and he was playing a little bit with the Soviet national team, so I would have seen him a couple of times. But he was 20 years old at the time. The thing that was clearly different about him was that all of the other previous Soviet goalies were very short, and they were pretty good, but not better than that, and that they weren't as good as their defense or forwards were compared to other teams. And so the assumption was that was going to be a real weakness for this Soviet team. And so here was Tretiak as a 20-year-old kid, and not having faced something like this before, that he wouldn't be able to handle it, and clearly he was able to. I mean, that's the wonderful thing about sports, is that you get thrown into situations, and he didn't know whether he was going to be able to handle it. We didn't know whether he was going to be able to handle it, and he found out he could. And then, of course, you know, that was really, I think, his launch pad for the rest of his career. That all of that turned out so well that then he became a backbone of a really good team through the 1970s. No, I don't think so. I mean, and it's only just, you know, that there are lots of different ways of stopping a puck. And you've got to find the way that works the best for you. And so he had his way, and although it wasn't very much different from the way others. The thing that was different was just by playing a European style, or playing against European competition, it was much more of a passing game. It was a much more of a side-to-side game. And so he didn't move out very much to cut the angles, because he didn't need to, whereas the NHL game was for a goalie to move out. And the question was, in that series, whether he would be able to handle the shots that would come with the big shooters from the NHL, who shot harder than any Soviet player did. And obviously he could handle that. But that's what made him different, I think, for us, for our scorers, you know, is that they were facing somebody who played much closer into his net than any goalie that they would have faced before.
Question in the back corner.
Yes, guys. Hi, Liam McGuire, TSN, 1200 Ottawa. Seeing as, by the way, we just passed the actual time of Paul's goal. It was just at 2:30, just a few minutes ago. So congratulations to every single person who's in here, the players, the ones sitting in the front row, for that epic, unbelievable series, as well as the guys up on the dais there. Two-part question. Paul and Peter, you guys were synonymous for one of the most significant moments in the series, just seconds before the goal, the change at the lineup change. Paul, you coming on and Pete coming off. Could you speak to that now, 50 years later? And a second part question to you, Ken. 34 seconds to go when Paul scores. What was going through your mind? I'm wondering what your thoughts were. And for anybody who does know, right at the very end of the game, you're skating out of your net. It looked like before Pat Stapleton picked up the puck, you were going to eat it if you had to. So could you speak to right when Paul scored in those final 34 seconds, and Paul and Peter, about that classic, iconic exchange? Thank you.
Well, I just found out for the first time when we were in Ottawa. I thought that he heard me. And you tell the story.
Well, the whole thing is that I was accused of never listening to anybody, and that might have been the last time I listened to anybody, was when you called me off the ice. But at the same time, I had been on the ice probably for about a minute and 20 minutes, 30 seconds. And I knew we were coming down. It was the last minute of play was happening. We'd been up the ice back and then back to the offensive zone. The puck was going into the offensive zone. I was actually further on the right side. I decided to come all the way over to the bench. And I went into the bench, and I think I'm sitting next to the backup goaltender who's sitting in the front row, EJ. And I sit down, and I'm tired. I don't even get to see the goal. And as it was, Paul had been calling me off the ice. He was told that he was going to be up. Their line was going to be ready to go for the final 45 seconds or so. So they were ready to go again. And Paul was smart enough to jump on. Was it fall first and then score, or just score and then fall?
I can't remember.
Okay. You take it from here.
Well, here's what happened. Our line was out on the ice. Clark, Ellis, and myself, and then he sent out the trio that he sent out. And you know, the next line was Gilbert, Rattel, and Dennis Hull. And so we thought it was over. But then Harry come down and said, if there's any time left, you guys are up. So we sit down, and I know that they're probably not going to come off anyway. But I tell you this, I can't even explain it today. There was about a minute left in the game, and something within me, because the Russians told us if the game ended up in a tie, they were going to win the series because they'd scored one more goal. And I just stood up and I started yelling at Peter Mohammed, I got to get on the ice. And maybe because I'd scored the winning goal in the other two games. I can't explain it, really. I never did that before in my life, and I never, ever did it again. And so I started yelling at him. And Frank was there, and he said, what the hell are you doing? And I didn't pay any attention to him. But thank goodness he didn't hear me, because he may not have. He doesn't listen to anybody, so thank God that he didn't hear me, because he probably would have stayed out there. So I jump over the boards, and Yvonne had it at the far side, and I yelled at him, and I'm a right-hand shot, and oh, it's just going to be perfect. I'll just snap this sucker into the top corner. But the puck was, I don't know whether it got deflected, but it was too far in front of me, and the guy tripped me. And I remember crashing into the boards, and I thought, I still have time, because I went through the whole team the year before. So I get up, and I panicked. Phil hit it at Trechak, and it wasn't a hard shot. He should never have let it out. Oh my God, I got the puck, and it was pure panic. If I had anything, I would have pulled it back and shot it in. Oh, I shot the puck along the ice, and oh, thank goodness he kicked it out right back to me. And I've been celebrating now for 50 years with us.
And 2 minutes, 50 years and 2 minutes.
Simon?
No, I don't know if you've been watching the Summit 72 series on TV. In the first episode, there was something very revealing. Phil Esposito admitted that he wasn't going to play for Team Canada. Bobby Orr had to talk him into playing. Did you know this, and how do you feel about that?
I haven't seen any of the videos yet, but there were things, there's a book coming out called The Greatest Comeback by the author, I believe, is John Bacon out of Detroit. I got to read a prelude of some of the things, and there were things in that book that I did not know anything about, things that happened, and why certain players didn't play, why certain players did play. And all in all, we just like some other conspiracy theories, things get revealed that you don't think about. And all I know is the best hockey Phil ever played was for Team Canada. Not only there, but also when he represented Team Canada in '76.
He actually also said in that documentary he had to talk his brother Tony O into playing for Canada as well. Thoughts on that, guys?
Well, again, everybody were doing different things in the summertime, hockey schools, so on and so forth. We had to leave money on the table somewhere else because, like Serge said, he was making 10.5 and at that time a little overpaid. My first contract, 11,000, definitely overpaid, and 14.5 was the year before we won the Stanley Cup. I won 14,500 in my 5th pro year. So it was hard.
Paul, did you know that Bobby Orr had to talk Phil into playing for Canada?
I didn't know until I read in the book also. I learned so many things. Gary Smith wrote a book, and I think I've read most of them, and you learn so much. Eleanor and I were amazed at the thing that we were there. We were on the part of the team, and so many things came to light. But you look back on it now, I think that it's almost predestined how things happen. Because if Phil, and I would suggest to you also, the best period of hockey ever played by a hockey player up until 1972 was the third period that Phil Esposito played. It is unbelievable. I'm so sorry he's not here today because he was just heart and soul of us. He really, really was. And I loved it. And we didn't see that talk of his for years later. And Johnny Esau should have got an Academy Award for just shutting up. And they were telling, and I didn't know this, they were telling Johnny, cut it off, cut off. And he decided, I am not cutting this guy off. And that was key in getting Canadians. So you look back, all these little things that, but I'm so glad it happened.
Imagine if Esposito hadn't played for Canada.
Oh,
But
devastated.
but the point is, he did. And once he did, he found a way.
Simon, can I ask you to pass the microphone over to Sean Fitzgerald at the athletic center? Sean?
Hey, gentlemen, I'm just wondering, I mean, 50 years later, there's lots of folks in this room, lots of folks who are going to be watching tonight who weren't even alive when the goal went in. Why do you think after 50 years, this moment in time, these 20 days, seem to resonate so loudly and broadly with Canadians?
Hollywood ending. That's what it's about.
I think that the Hollywood ending is the punchline. But as you know, that the punchline only works if the story is great. And it's the story that leads up to the punchline that delivers the punch. And the story that led up to the punchline was the fact that we originated this game, we developed this game, we were the best in the world at this game, and for a period of about 10 years before 1972, even though we were the best and knew we were the best and everyone knew we were the best, that the Russians were called world champions. And that was annoying. And it was annoying to players, and it was annoying to Canadians. And that's what we had inside us as we skated onto the ice for the puck drop at the Montreal Forum. And that's what was inside the 19,000 Canadians at the Forum that night, and the 22 million Canadians that were at home watching, and the 3,000 Canadians that were in Moscow. That was inside all of us. And the playing of that out, and it's really kind of my favorite statistic, you know, of all of them in the series. And Liam was talking earlier about how this was the moment at which the game had ended. Well, and I've told this story before, but the game started at 8 o'clock Moscow time. That meant it was 1:30 in the afternoon in St. John's, Newfoundland. It was 1 o'clock in Halifax. It was 12 noon in Montreal, Ottawa, and Toronto. It was 11 in the morning in Winnipeg. It was 10 in the morning in Calgary and Edmonton. And it was 9 in the morning in Vancouver, Victoria, and Whitehorse. And it was on a Thursday. The entire game was played during work hours and school hours. And despite all of that, with a population of 22 million Canadians, 16 million Canadians watched. I mean, that's sort of the punchline, you know. That kind of is game, set, and match in terms of determining the fact that it did matter so much to Canadians. And the question is that what is it that, you know, could do that? And I think really it was that deep down there was a deep feeling about hockey and a deep feeling about Canada, and somehow the two were connected, and that this mattered because of that. Maybe.
Thank you.
I know that we'd like to sit in this room listening to stories for hours, but I'm going to endeavor to keep us on schedule here so we can accommodate some media interviews after. So we'll take 2 more questions if we could, please. Kevin McGrath?
Just gentlemen, really interested in the last 34 seconds, and obviously, what are you thinking in those final 34 seconds?
Nothing. I mean,
That's because he saw me come on the ice. Right, Yvonne? You and I and Phil, and he said, "Oh boy, we're ready to go."
Pete, were you on the ice? Who was on the ice at the end?
Well, I got to tell you how this happened. After I scored the winning goal in the 7th game, Ronnie Ellis, my great buddy and line mate, and we're sitting there, and I said to Ronnie, "You've been saving yourself. You're going to score the winning goal tomorrow night." I told him that. And if Ronnie were here today, he would tell you that's the story. Well, anyway, the game went on. And I'll tell you what, I just couldn't wait for him any bloody longer.
Last question. Marty?
Nothing that hasn't happened before. You know, we're going to celebrate as Canadians, and I don't know what they've got planned over here, but it'll be terrific. And, you know, we'll be sitting there as a bunch of guys, and we'll look at, we went to war and we came through. And so that's the one thing about Canada, maybe not be great at celebrating some things, but I'll tell you what, Canada has been incredible. And I think a lot of people have you know, responsible for that. So Serge and the guys that put this all together. And Kelly, where's Kelly? Are you in the room, Kelly? Oh, gosh, she had to go to work. Well, she was, and John York, all these guys that put all this time in to put it together. So we're going to celebrate with everybody. And I got my daughter and I got 2 of my grandsons coming tonight. Man, is that going to be good.
Thank you, gentlemen. With that, we're going to do a quick photo op here off to the side of the stage for any of the photographers interested, and then we'll do some media one-on-ones and scrums immediately following. Thanks, everybody.